everything is trauma.
Yeah.
How do we strike the balance there, while about being mindful of people's experiences while also not overplaying it to the point that we make everyone a victim?
That's a good, yeah, that's good. I think it's just a balance of honoring their experience and kind of letting people lead the way. Like, I never take, when I'm in the room with a client, I never take on the role as the expert in the room. I think that you are the expert on your life, right? And so, I do definitely a client centered approach. So I kind of follow your lead. But yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question at this point, but there is that fine line of like, because of some life experiences that just because I know of somebody's life experiences does not mean that I'm going to, as a therapist, that I'm not going to challenge them and I'm not going to push them and have high expectations of them. The same with children. I tell this to educators, just because we are high on support and nurturing does not mean that we have to be high on expectations too. We can't have low expectations and high support, because then we're just kind of being permissive, right? And not having a standard for them and having goals and aspirations for them to reach. But if we're the opposite, like if we're really high on expectations and standards and very low on support and nurturing, then that's kind of more of that punitive approach that we're taking. So I think we need to have both and, right? We have to have high expectations, but also high support and kind of supporting our clients and just people that we do life with.
That was a phenomenal answer. I didn't have an answer. When that came out of my mouth, I was like, I don't even know how I would answer this. And I think you nailed it with by going to the educational realm, where you got nurturing and support, right? And this is object relations theory too, right? You got the critical parent or transactional analysis, critical parent, nurturing parent, and so on and so forth. But the point is, we don't remove standard and expectations simply because we validate somebody's horrible lived experience, right?
Yes.
So, and I think the first step toward that is just being a listening, empathic audience, where we don't presume that we know, and we listen with full value to what they have to say, because it's like, if it was emotionally something or other for you, that's it. That's the end of the story. I don't get to question that. I can help you shape it. I can help you come through it with a different context, but I don't get to challenge it and say that's not accurate. That's why experiential comparisons are so useless. Like, we all experience things differently, There is no, well, if I were you, I wouldn't have, because if I were you, I would have. And Christian Conti talks about that in his yield theory too. So that's a phenomenal answer. Speaking of hand-me-down trauma that may have affected people, I want to shift back into the religious scope, because there's a lot of people who've been wounded by religion, and yet they find a deep sense of spirituality that they want to pursue. And sometimes those are in conflict with what they've been told by big religion about going to counseling. It's witchcraft, it's of the occult, it's so whatever it is, and it couldn't be further from the truth. How do you work with those faith-based sectors and helping them change their mind about this profession that we do?
Yeah, I think I normally start with just talking about what mental health is, and kind of talking about, how mental health is part of our physical health. Like, we can't separate our mental health from our physical health, because we're clearly in one body, right? Our brain, mind is inside of our body. And so if we're talking to people, if we're using scripture, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in good health, right? The word says that. If we're talking about God wants us to be in good health, that includes our mind. And so if we're sick and we go to a doctor, if we get a cold and we go to a doctor, if we break a leg, we go to a doctor. What happens when we have a emotional or a mental injury that we experience? When we experience a trauma, right? we need to go see someone that is skilled and licensed and professional that can help us kind of work through that. If we break a bone, we go get a cast put on. But what happens when we have an emotional wound? We need to go to a therapist and give us that type of a cast, an emotional cast, some support around that we need. And so I think when I start by talking about that as part of our physical health, people are a little bit more open and they start to see the connections as like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I do if I got diabetes, I'm gonna go take some insulin. If I have depression, it might mean that I might need some medication to support me through this time. So that's kind of how I approach it in the beginning.
Do you find a lot of people are, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Are they still suspicious throughout the process, or do they give over pretty quickly?
It's a mixed bag. Usually it takes some, like people that have that deep entrenched religious trauma or messages that they've been told for years. It usually takes time. They're a little bit more skeptical when they come in. And it's just like that fine line that you have to walk. I probably wouldn't come in talking about, energies in our body and noticing your chakras to somebody that's like hardcore Christian. You take baby steps.
What's the best success that you've seen with somebody who's been of the spiritual community? We're mostly talking about Christian, but I mean, I assume you work with other faiths too, and their experience with psychotherapy. What's one that stands out to you?
One saying like, oh, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Like not realizing like, oh, we're just going to have a conversation. Like, I don't know what they thought I was going to do when they came in. Like, did you think I was going to like attach you to like some cord? Like, they're like, this is good. Like, I was like, yeah, this is what we're going to do every week. We're just going to talk about and process how you're feeling. And I'm going to maybe teach you some breathing techniques. You're going to try them at home. You're going to come back and tell me how that went. And so I think people giving it a try and realizing like, I'm not here to tell you. And I think there's also a misconception that, therapists give advice and they tell you what to do with your life and they, you go and change all these things. And it's like, no, actually, I'm never going to tell you what you need to do. We're going to process it together and, help you decide what the best choice is for you. But I think that's the biggest misconception that, I don't need nobody to tell me what to do. Like only God can tell me what to do. You're right. I'm not here to change that for you, but I'm here to help you process some of those emotions.
That's awesome. That's really well stated. Are you finding too that the pastors, this has been my experience, I'm just seeing if it's yours too, the pastors are like really relieved that they have somebody to point to now, that they don't have to carry the burdens themselves? You're smiling and nodding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think before our pastors kind of were burdened with a lot of that and they weren't trained to do that, right? They didn't go through the same schooling and the training that we had. They gave great spiritual advice and guidance, but when it came to some more like clinical issues and things that were kind of above them, that was a lot. And so I think that they are starting to embrace it more now because it's like, hey, yes, I can pray with you after church. And Monday morning, I need you to call this person and they're going to help you the rest of the way. We're going to, kind of do this balance of working our faith, but also what are the practical tools that we need to put in place to really see healing and progress go forward. Because like we play a part in our healing as well. I do believe, that there are, miraculous things that happen. But a lot of the times, we've got to put in some effort and work behind that too.
Yeah. My pastors always said that, God answers prayers through people. That maybe miracles do still exist. It's tough to chalk it up. It's like, was it a miracle that your cancer went away? Probably, but without the help of the oncologist, that's an answered prayer. So I appreciate that. That's really cool. I'm going to shift gears. I'm mindful of time. We're coming up on an hour here, and I want to be respectful of your evening. But I don't want to leave without talking about the pandemic and how our profession has been, we talk a lot about frontline healthcare workers. My wife's a nurse, she's one of them, but we're getting overwhelmed too. And it's not just in client volume, it's in our own mental ability to handle it, because we've been
Yeah.
long seen as the space for everybody to come to and work through their stuff. We've got our own stuff, and it's very, very hard. And I'm wondering what you're doing with this, how you're tending to yourself, but also what you're offering to your clients now.
Yeah, you're right. It's been a lot. It's been heavy. And I think the one thing that I put in place that has helped me, and every clinician can't do this, and I understand that, but I have stopped taking new clients at this time just because I realize that I'm at my capacity, and I don't know if I have more that I can offer to new clients. But what I have done in place of that is I started a grief support group that was an 8-week group. Actually, tonight's my last night of group, that what I'm doing right after this call. Because I wanted to be able to provide services because it's so needed at such a large scale, but then there's only one of me. And like you said, we have our own things happening and things that are going on. So I was like, what is something that I can do? I can't take on like 10 new clients, but I can offer a support group one night a week where I can see 10 clients at one time and offer some skills and some tools that they can implement, and I can impact 10 people without taking on individual clients, which is a little bit heavier. You all, what goes into, seeing an individual client and what that looks like. So that's something that I've been doing to protect my own space and mental health while still kind of serving my community.
That's pretty cool. I think that you should expand your agency, hire some interns, train people up, and grow the profession, because I think you're awesome. But that's just me projecting my desires onto you.
I've thought about it. I think that probably is a long-term goal. Maybe I need to talk to you about what that looks like, because it just seems like such a big feat to take on. But I would love to kind of get into some more supervision, because I do feel like the field needs, there's a lot of amazing clinicians out there, and there's a lot of clinicians that probably could have used probably some better supervision and support. And so I do feel like I do want to contribute back in that way, because I know I had 2 amazing clinical supervisors. And so that's the only reason I am the way that I am today. So I would like to give that back to the profession.
It's not as heavy of a lift as it looks. And this is for anybody who's listening who thinks that they might want to undertake something that looks really heavy, but don't know if they can do it. It sounds cartoonish when I talk about the stuff that I've done in the last 5.5 years or so. And I mentioned some of that before we came on, family, young children business. I also chaired my licensing board for a couple of years, rewrote a bunch of laws in the state, coached a couple podcasts, it just sounds like, how is that possible? And what I've learned is through the reading the works of Carl Jung and some of my own, mentorship from Christian Conti, is that the human spirit and the human psyche being limitless in its capacity means that you could always take on more than you realize. And so I would say this: you can do it. It's not that hard. And if you set aside the idea that you are limited, amazing things start happening. And it doesn't feel so much like work after a while too. So I'll be happy to help you figure that out. I obviously don't know, business laws in Georgia, but I can certainly tell you conceptually about what potholes not to step in, because Lindsay and I have certainly stepped in our fair share. But it doesn't have to be a gigantic monumental undertaking with a whole bunch of sacrifice. You start small and you start, growing incrementally. And before you know it, you're like, holy cow, we're doing it. We're really shepherding a lot of new clinicians through the profession the right way. And
wow.
And it is neat. It's neat to see the healing augment, that's what we're here for, right? There's no shortage of hurt. So we don't need to be, market competitive about it.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm going to let you go to do your group, but the way I try to conclude these podcasts is I ask you one thing that you want to leave with the listening audience that they may want to take away with them, or both, or one thing that maybe you understand differently after the conversation. They could be the same thing. They could be different, but what do you want to leave everybody with?
Oh, I hate when people put me on the spot with these kinds of questions.
I should have emailed this to you.
You said what?
I said, I'm sorry. I should have emailed this to you in advance.
No, it's okay. It's totally okay. I'm going to start keeping something in my back pocket to say. Okay. Something I want to leave the listening audience with. I think what I would say is that, well, first of all, this year has been tough for more than one reason. And whatever you're experiencing, I just want you to know you're not crazy. I think it's good for people to know that what you're experiencing, your body and your brain is responding the way it should respond. It's normal. It's trying to protect you. And so you are not crazy. You are okay.